They thought the cat had passed away, but he never left his owner's side. Cat's letter. Have you ever felt that emptiness that somehow still leaves paw prints around the house, even years after goodbye? Some silences just never really go away. My name is Dusty, and this letter is for anyone who has loved so deeply that missing someone has become part of your everyday life. I wasn't born special. I was just a lost kitten in a cold Ohio backyard, with dirty fur and suspicious eyes, until I was taken in by Violet, that woman with small gestures and quiet tenderness, who knew how to warm the house just by the smell of fresh bread and chamomile tea in the morning. From the beginning, she was my whole world. On my first night, I trembled at the bottom of the basket and woke up feeling her fingers stroking my ears. I learned to recognize the sound of her step on the wooden floor, the creak of the sofa when she sat down to read, the ticking of the old clock on the wall. I grew up hearing stories of a youth kept in yellowed letters, of a distant son who rarely wrote, of friends that life gradually took away. As a kitten, I chased shadows on the carpet, played with balls of yarn, hid among the plants on the porch. Time passed, and with it the seasons too. I remember the smell of burning firewood in winter, the warmth of the sun on spring afternoons, the swaying of the curtains when storms threatened. When I got old, I traded mischief for quiet companionship. All I needed was to lie in Violet's lap, listen to her slow breathing, and feel with my body the presence of someone who understands without needing words. She took care of me even when her health weakened. She spent nights by my side on days I had fever, whispering promises that I would be okay. When sickness came for me, it was she who held my head and, with teary eyes, asked me to wait for her on the other side. The moment of departure was peaceful, but the emptiness I left behind was filled with memories. In the days that followed, Violet walked around the house, dragging the blanket where I had slept for years, smelled my things, whispered stories into the void. On cold nights, she turned on the old radio and, for moments, was certain she heard my purring mixing with the music. The neighbors said it was time to move on, but how do you say goodbye to a love like that? Violet hesitated a lot when, months later, an abandoned kitten appeared at her door. She spent nights looking at my picture, asking if it would be betrayal to make room for a new heart. But one of those nights she dreamed of me. I saw my own reflection, young again, jumping lightly through the garden, carrying in my mouth the key to the chest where she kept old letters and memories. When she woke up, she opened the chest, found a forgotten letter from her son and a photograph of her smiling young next to a black cat from the past. As if life was saying, there's room for both missing someone and starting over in the same heart. Time passed. Guilt gave way to affection. Violet started smiling again, but she never moved my blanket from the corner of the living room. Sometimes she felt the light weight of my paws on her bed, saw the curtain move without wind, or heard the radio playing our favorite song by itself. She knew it was my way of saying, I'm still here, even if invisible. When Violet's steps became too slow, she started talking to me out loud, asking for advice, sharing secrets. On the morning of her departure, the sun drew a golden stripe across my old blanket, and with a thread of a voice she whispered my name. In the instant she closed her eyes, I felt our story coming together again. Two silences meeting, two hearts without hurry, a friendship that neither time nor death could erase. I'm writing this letter for you who have lost someone, for those who miss someone, for those who keep in their heart the hope of meeting again. Love doesn't end. It changes form, spreads into the details, lives in the smells, in the sounds, in everyday rituals. If you notice a rumpled blanket, a familiar smell, a whisper in the dark, maybe it's just a message from someone who loved you. Make room for missing them, but don't close your heart to new beginnings, because the beauty of life isn't in the end, but in what remains, and in the love that, even invisible, never abandons those left behind. I want to tell you the whole story now from the very beginning. Not just how it ended, but how we found each other. How an ordinary Tuesday in October changed both our lives forever. The rain was coming down hard that day. I was just a tiny thing, barely 8 weeks old according to what the vet would later say. My mother had disappeared 2 days before, and my siblings had all been scooped up by a kind woman in a blue van who worked for the shelter. But I was too scared, too quick, and I'd slipped away before she could catch me. For 2 nights, I huddled under a garden shed getting thinner, listening to thunder roll across the sky. That morning I was desperate enough to venture out, hoping to find something, anything, to eat. That's when the downpour started. I made a dash across 3 yards before finding temporary shelter under a porch swing at 437 Maple Street. I was soaked through, shivering violently, when the back door opened. Violet Jenkins wasn't looking for a cat that day. She was 63 years old, a retired high school English teacher who had been a widow for 8 years. She was simply stepping out to move her newly potted chrysanthemums under the eaves so they wouldn't drown in the storm. But when her eyes met mine, my tiny, wet, pathetic self pressed against her porch railing, something passed between us. Recognition, maybe. 2 souls alone facing the rain. "Oh," she said softly. Just that. One small sound. She knelt down, creaking a little at the knees, and held out her hand. I was too hungry and cold to run. When she scooped me up, wrapping me in her gardening apron, I felt warmth for the first time in days. Her hands smelled like earth and bread. Inside, she dried me with a soft towel, made a little bed from a shoebox and an old flannel shirt, and fed me warm milk with an eyedropper because I was too weak to lap properly. "We'll find you a proper home tomorrow," she told me as she placed the box near the heating vent. "Someone young, with children perhaps. I'm too old to start over with a kitten." But that night, when I cried out in the darkness, disoriented and afraid, she came downstairs in her blue robe. She lifted me from the box and held me against her chest, humming something soft and low. We fell asleep together in her recliner, and by morning we both knew I was already home. Violet named me Dusty because of my grey fur, which turned out to be quite handsome once it was clean and fluffy. "Like sterling silver," she'd say, rubbing behind my ears in that perfect way that made me close my eyes and purr so loud the china in her cabinet would vibrate. Her house on Maple Street wasn't large or fancy, but it was full of things that had stories attached to them. The grandfather clock in the hallway had belonged to her parents. The colourful quilts stacked in the wooden chest were made by her grandmother. The wall of bookshelves held paperbacks with cracked spines and dog-eared pages, evidence of stories well loved and often revisited. I explored every corner of that house, claiming it inch by inch as cats do. The sunny patch by the bay window became my morning spot. The space under the dining room table was perfect for afternoon naps. The braided rug in front of the fireplace was where I'd stretch out on winter evenings, letting the warmth sink into my bones. Violet talked to me from the very beginning. Not baby talk, but real conversations. She'd tell me about her day while she cooked dinner, read interesting passages from her books aloud to me, ask my opinion on whether she should call her son Michael for his birthday or just send a card. "He's always so busy, Dusty. I don't want to bother him." She never had other pets. I was her first and only animal companion. "Never saw the appeal before you," she told me once, scratching under my chin. "Fur everywhere, litter boxes to clean. But here you are, and I can't imagine this house without you in it." That first year together, we established our routines. I'd wake her at precisely 6:30 each morning by gently patting her face with my paw. She'd grumble but get up, make her coffee, cream, no sugar, and toast with raspberry jam. She'd put my food in the blue ceramic bowl with little fish painted around the rim, a special purchase she'd made on our 1-month anniversary together. After breakfast, she'd work in her little garden while I supervised from the porch steps or stalked bugs in the grass. Afternoons were for reading or sewing or baking, depending on her mood and the weather. I'd keep her company, sometimes helping by batting at loose threads or stealing her knitting needles, which always made her laugh despite her attempts to scold me. Evenings, we'd listen to classical music on the old wooden radio that had been her husband's. "George loved Beethoven," she'd tell me, eyes distant with memory. "Never missed a symphony on public radio." I didn't care much for Beethoven, but I loved how she'd stroke my back in time with the music, from head to tail, over and over until we were both drowsy with contentment. Visitors were rare at our house. Once a month, Violet's bridge club would come over. 4 other ladies with white hair and cardigan sweaters who smelled like different perfumes and always exclaimed over how big I was getting or how shiny my coat looked. I accepted their admiration as my due, allowing them to pet me briefly before retreating to watch from the stairs. There was Mrs. Abernathy from next door, who sometimes brought over zucchini bread or checked on Violet if she noticed her newspaper hadn't been brought in. There was the UPS man who was afraid of cats and would leave packages on the far edge of the porch if he spotted me in the window. And once or twice a year there was Michael, Violet's son, who never stayed long enough and always left her a little quieter than usual. The first time I met Michael was 3 months after I came to live with Violet. He arrived unannounced on a Sunday, driving a sleek black car that purred almost as nicely as I did. He was tall like his mother but broader, with the same kind eyes but fewer laugh lines around them. "Mom, what's this?" he asked when I sauntered into the living room to investigate the newcomer. "This is Dusty," Violet said, and I heard the smile in her voice. "He came to live with me in October." "A cat? You got a cat?" Michael sounded surprised. "I thought you didn't like animals in the house." "I never did before," Violet admitted, picking me up and scratching that perfect spot under my chin. "But Dusty's different. He found me, during that big storm when the Peterson's oak tree split in half. Poor little thing was soaked through, half-starved. Michael watched us with an expression I couldn't quite read. Well, he looks healthy now. Spoiled rotten, I'd say." "Nonsense," Violet replied, but her cheeks pinked up a bit. "He's just well loved." Later that night, after Michael had gone to the guest room, Violet confided in me. "He worries, thinks I'm getting too old to live alone. Keeps talking about those retirement communities in Florida." She shuddered. "Can you imagine, Dusty? Me in Florida, with all those organized activities and people playing shuffleboard?" I headbutted her hand sympathetically. I couldn't imagine Violet anywhere but here, in this house with its familiar creaks and shadows. "Now that I have you, though," she scratched behind my ears, "he can't say I'm all alone, can he?" And it was true. With me there, the house was never silent. Even when neither of us made a sound, there was communication. The slow blink of my eyes telling her I felt safe and loved. The gentle weight of her hand on my side as I napped beside her. Both of us breathing together in contented synchrony. Those first few years were the sweetest. I was young and full of energy, getting into everything. I knocked plants off windowsills, shredded the toilet paper, and once managed to open a cabinet and eat an entire package of butter, which I do not recommend, by the way. The aftermath was unpleasant for both of us. Violet never stayed angry with me. "You're just being a cat," she'd say as she cleaned up whatever mess I'd made. "I can't fault you for your nature." I caught my first mouse in the spring of my 2nd year. It was a tiny field mouse that had somehow found its way into the kitchen pantry. I was immensely proud, carrying my prize directly to Violet's bedroom to present it to her at 2:14 in the morning. Her scream woke Mrs. Abernathy next door, who called to make sure everything was all right. But once she calmed down, Violet praised me extravagantly. "Such a mighty hunter," she cooed, after disposing of the mouse in the outdoor trash can and washing her hands 3 times. Protecting our home from vermin. She bought me a special catnip toy the next day as a reward, and I magnanimously decided not to bring her any more dead presents. Live ones occasionally, but that's another story. The seasons passed, marking our time together with subtle changes. Spring meant open windows and the intoxicating scent of blooming lilacs from the bush beneath the kitchen window. Summer brought the steady whir of the ceiling fans and cool tile floors, perfect for sprawling on hot afternoons. Fall was my favorite. The windows opened just enough for crisp air, but not enough for me to squeeze through, pumpkin-scented candles, and Violet wearing soft sweaters that were perfect for kneading. Winter meant the fireplace, thick quilts on the beds, and Violet's homemade soup simmering on the stove. Each night I'd curl up against her side, my body a small furnace against her increasingly cold feet. "My hot water bottle with fur," she'd murmur sleepily, tucking me closer. Time leaves its mark on all of us. For Violet, it was the deepening lines on her face, the extra seconds it took her to climb the stairs, the reading glasses that became a permanent fixture on the chain around her neck. For me, the changes were more subtle at first. I didn't jump quite as high. The birds outside the window still fascinated me, but I was content to watch rather than chatter at them with predatory excitement. Naps grew longer. The veterinarian, Dr. Winters, started using words like senior cat and age-appropriate diet. On my 10th birthday, the anniversary of the day Violet found me, since my actual birth date was unknown, she baked a tiny tuna cake with a 10 candle on top. She sang to me, took a picture of me with the cake, and then fed me small bites while telling me about all our years together. "Do you remember when you got stuck in the Christmas tree? Or when you somehow ended up locked in the linen closet for 3 hours, and I tore the house apart looking for you. Or that time the blue jay built a nest right outside the living room window, and you spent an entire month watching those babies grow up. I remembered. I remembered everything. The way she'd laugh when I did something silly. How she cried into my fur after difficult phone calls with Michael. The nights she'd read aloud to me from her favorite books. The mornings we'd sit together on the porch swing, watching the neighborhood wake up. It was around that time that Violet started slowing down too. Her movements became more careful, more measured. She started using a cane on days when her knee bothered her. The garden grew a little wilder as she spent less time tending it. "Getting old isn't for the faint of heart, Dusty," she told me one evening, as we both creaked our way onto her bed. "But having someone to grow old with makes it bearable." I pressed my face against her palm in silent agreement. Our 12th year together brought changes neither of us was prepared for. It started with small things. Violet forgetting where she put her glasses, usually on top of her head, or the names of characters in the mystery novels she read. But then came the morning she put the kettle on for tea and walked away, forgetting it entirely until the smoke detector blared. Another time she got lost driving back from the grocery store she'd been going to for 30 years. And worst of all, one terrible afternoon when she called me George before catching herself, eyes wide with confusion and fear. The doctor called it early-stage dementia. Michael flew in from California for the appointments, wearing a suit that made him look important but tired. "Mom, you can't stay here alone anymore," he insisted after the diagnosis was confirmed. "What if something happens? What if you leave the stove on or fall down the stairs?" "I'm not alone," Violet replied firmly. "I have Dusty." Michael ran a hand through his graying hair. "Mom, be reasonable. A cat can't call 911. A cat can't help you if you fall." I wanted to argue that I absolutely would find a way to get help if Violet needed it, but of course all I could do was glare at him from my spot on the couch beside her. In the end, they compromised. Violet would stay in her home, our home but with help. A woman named Eleanor would come 5 days a week, cooking meals that could be easily reheated, helping with housework, driving Violet to appointments, and making sure medications were taken properly. "And what about when you're gone?" Violet asked Michael tearfully before he left. "What will happen to Dusty?" I was 14 by then, no spring chicken myself. My joints ached in the mornings, especially when it rained. My once sterling coat had dulled somewhat, with white hairs appearing around my muzzle and eyes. "Mrs. Abernathy has already agreed to take him if it becomes necessary," Michael assured her. "But let's not worry about that now. One day at a time, Mum." Eleanor turned out to be a blessing. A sturdy woman in her 50s with capable hands and a no-nonsense attitude tempered by genuine kindness. She wasn't a cat person originally, but I won her over by helping her find Violet's lost reading glasses under the bathroom sink, and by keeping Violet company during the hours Eleanor couldn't be there. "That cat understands every word we say," Eleanor told Violet one afternoon as they played gin rummy at the kitchen table. "I swear he's eavesdropping on our conversations." Violet smiled. "Dusty's the smartest cat who ever lived," she said matter-of-factly. "He's also the best companion, aren't you, my sweet boy?" I purred my agreement from my spot on the windowsill, basking in both the late afternoon sun and her praise. That winter was difficult. Violet had good days and bad days. On good days, she was almost her old self, baking cookies with Eleanor's help, reading her mystery novels, telling me stories about her childhood in Kentucky or her years teaching English to reluctant teenagers. On bad days, she would get confused about what year it was or where certain things belonged in the house. Once I found her trying to put the milk away in the linen closet. Another time, she couldn't remember how to turn on the television she'd had for 15 years. But even on her worst days, she never forgot me. Sometimes she would introduce me to Eleanor multiple times in one day. "This is Dusty, my cat. He found me during a storm." Did I tell you that already? But she always knew who I was, always reached for me when she felt anxious or overwhelmed. I stayed close to her constantly that winter. When she napped on the couch, I curled up on her lap. When she sat in her recliner watching old movies, I squeezed in beside her. At night, I slept right next to her pillow, purring to soothe her when she woke confused at 3 a.m. By spring, we were both moving slower. The vet diagnosed me with kidney disease. Common in older cats, Dr. Winters explained gently to Violet, who cried all the way home from the appointment. "We're not giving up," she told me fiercely that night, hand trembling slightly as she stroked my fur. "We've still got plenty of good days ahead of us, Dusty, you and me." She learned to give me subcutaneous fluids at home, a small miracle of love and determination for a woman whose hands weren't always steady anymore. Eleanor helped when needed, but Violet insisted on doing as much of my care as she could manage. "You've taken care of me all these years," she'd murmur as she carefully inserted the needle under my skin. "Now it's my turn to take care of you." That summer marked 15 years together. 15 years of shared breaths, shared spaces, shared love. Both of us moving carefully now, both of us with more quiet days than active ones. But still, there was joy. Sunlight through the windows. Birds at the feeder. Violet had Michael hang low enough for me to watch from my cushion on the porch. Eleanor's lemon squares that Violet would sneak tiny bites off to me, even though we both knew I shouldn't have them. My appetite began to wane as fall approached. The fluids helped, and Violet tried everything to tempt me. Chicken she boiled specially, tuna juice, even the expensive food from the pet boutique that Eleanor brought over. "Please eat, sweetheart," she'd plead, offering morsels from her fingers. Just a little bit. Sometimes I managed a few bites to make her happy, but we both knew. Animals understand these things in a way humans sometimes can't let themselves accept. My body was wearing out. The long, slow process of shutting down had begun. The last few weeks I rarely left Violet's side. My world had narrowed to just her scent, her voice, her touch. I no longer bothered with the sunny spots on the floor or the birds at the feeder. All that mattered was being where she was. She knew too. I could see it in her eyes, hear it in the slight tremor in her voice when she spoke to me. One night, she bypassed the living room entirely and took me straight upstairs to her bedroom, settling me on the pillow next to hers. "Let's just rest together," she whispered, her fingers gently stroking from my head to my tail, again and again. I purred for her, though it took more effort than it once had. I wanted her to know that despite everything I was content, that this life with her had been everything a cat could want. Safety, comfort, purpose, love, so much love. The next morning I couldn't stand up. My legs simply wouldn't support me anymore. Violet cried as she called Eleanor, who came right away and helped get me into the soft-sided carrier they used for vet visits. Dr. Winters was gentle as always. He explained what Violet already knew, that my kidneys were failing completely now, that I was in pain, that it was time to let go. They let Violet hold me during those final moments. I was wrapped in the soft blue blanket from my bed at home, cradled against her chest just like that first night 15 years ago, when I was a rain-soaked kitten, and she was a woman who thought she was too old to start over with a pet. "I love you, Dusty," she whispered against my fur. "My good boy, my very best friend. I'll miss you every single day." I summoned the last of my strength to nudge my head against her hand, our familiar gesture of affection. As the medicine began to work, and the room started to fade around me, I fixed my eyes on hers, trying to tell her what I couldn't say in words, that this wasn't really goodbye, that love like ours doesn't simply vanish, that I would watch over her, wait for her, love her still. Just before everything went dark, I heard her whisper, "Wait for me on the other side, sweet boy." And I promised her, with my last conscious thought, that I would. Death isn't what humans think. It isn't darkness or nothingness. It's a shifting, a change of perspective. Suddenly I was both there and not there. I could see Violet weeping as Dr. Winters gently took my body, now empty of me. I could follow as Eleanor drove her home, arm around her shoulders as they walked into the house that seemed too quiet now. I was there when she placed my blue blanket in the corner of the living room, arranged just so, as if I might still curl up there at any moment. I was there when she took out photo albums and spent hours looking at pictures of me through the years. The Christmas I knocked over the tree, the time I got into her knitting and wound up tangled in blue yarn, the day I dozed off in a patch of sunlight with one paw covering my eyes. I wish I could tell you that Violet was okay after I was gone, that she picked herself up and moved forward with strength and resilience. But the truth is, grief is messy and hard, especially at 80 years old, especially with a mind that's already struggling to hold on to the present. The first few weeks, she looked for me constantly. She'd wake up in the night calling my name, get up to check my food and water dishes, before remembering they weren't there anymore. Eleanor found her one afternoon sitting on the kitchen floor, sobbing as she held my old collar. "I just miss him so much," she told Eleanor. "The house feels empty without him. Michael called more often. He'd never understood our bond while I was alive, but he seemed to grasp, finally, how important I had been to his mother. He sent flowers on what would have been my 16th birthday, with a card that read simply, 'Thinking of you and Dusty today.' Grief changes over time. The raw edges soften. The constant ache becomes intermittent. 3 months after I was gone, I watched Violet really smile at something on the television. She looked surprised afterward, maybe a little guilty, as if enjoying anything without me there was somehow wrong. "It's okay, Violet," I tried to tell her, rubbing against her legs the way I used to. "You're supposed to keep living." She couldn't feel me, not exactly, but sometimes she'd pause, look around the room with a curious expression. "Dusty," she'd whisper. "Is that you?" That spring, something happened that I hadn't expected. A small grey kitten appeared on the front porch, so tiny it could barely climb the steps, meowing pitifully in the rain. A mirror of my own arrival all those years ago. Eleanor found it first, brought it inside wrapped in a dish towel. "Look what was outside, Violet," she said, holding out the soggy bundle. "Poor little thing is half drowned." Violet's hands shook as she reached out to touch the kitten's head. "It's grey," she said softly, "like sterling silver." I felt no jealousy as I watched her carefully dry the kitten, feed it warmed milk from an eyedropper, make a bed from a shoebox and an old flannel shirt, just as she had done for me. Instead, I felt something like relief, like pieces falling into place. "We'll find it a home tomorrow," she told Eleanor. But I knew, and I think she knew too, that the kitten was already home. She named him Oliver, after her favorite Dickens character. "A small orphan who finds his family," she explained to Eleanor the next day when she announced the kitten would be staying. "Besides, he doesn't look like a Dusty. That name belonged to someone else." Oliver was nothing like me. He was bold where I had been cautious, vocal where I had been mostly quiet, more interested in heights than cozy spots on the floor. But he loved Violet immediately and completely, the way animals sometimes do when they recognize a soul that needs them. Watching them together, I realized that this continuation, this new love growing alongside the memory of the old, was exactly as it should be. Violet still missed me. She still talked to me sometimes, especially at night when she was alone in her bedroom. Oliver preferred sleeping on the back of the couch downstairs, but now she had a reason to get up in the morning, something to care for and about, a living creature who needed her as much as she needed him. "I think Dusty would approve of you," she told Oliver one evening as they sat together on the porch swing. "He was the best cat in the world, you know. You have big paws to fill." Oliver meowed and batted at her dangling glasses chain, making her laugh. I pressed against her other side, my invisible form a counterbalance to the kitten's solid warmth, completing a circle none of them could see, but that felt right and perfect to me. Violet lived 3 more years after I died. 3 years of slow decline mixed with moments of perfect clarity. 3 years of Oliver growing from a scraggly kitten to a handsome adult cat. 3 years of Eleanor's steadfast care, Michael's increasingly frequent visits, and my constant unseen presence. In her final days, when she was confined to her bed and Oliver rarely left her side, Violet began to see me. Not clearly, perhaps, not the way she saw the living people and things around her, but she would look directly at me sometimes and smile that special smile that had always been just for me. "There you are," she whispered one evening when we were alone, Eleanor having stepped out to make a phone call. "I've been waiting for you." I jumped onto the bed beside her, careful not to disturb Oliver, who was curled against her hip, and settled next to her pillow in my old spot. Her hand moved as if to stroke me, passing through my form but somehow still connecting. "It won't be long now," she told me, her voice raspy but calm. "We'll be together again soon." On her last morning, sunshine streamed through the bedroom window, falling across her bed in a warm golden stripe. Oliver was asleep on the chair nearby. Eleanor had stepped out to get fresh coffee. Michael was on his way from the airport, but wouldn't arrive for another hour. It was just Violet and me, together as we had been so many mornings before. Her breathing was shallow, her eyes closed, but when I meowed softly, the first sound I'd been able to make since dying, She opened her eyes and looked directly at me. "Dusty," she whispered, the word barely audible. "My good boy." I pressed my head against her hand, and this time, this one magical time, she felt it. I knew she did because she smiled, that special smile, and I felt her soul reach for mine just as her physical body exhaled its final breath. There's no way to describe what happened next, no human words for the way we moved together beyond the confines of time and space and physical form. All I can tell you is that she was young again suddenly, and I was sleek and strong, and we were running through sunlight somewhere that felt like home, but better, more vibrant, more real than any home we'd known before. So that's our story. Not just about a cat and an old woman who found each other and shared 15 years of ordinary, extraordinary love. It's about how that love continued even after what humans call death. About how real love never truly ends. It just changes form, finds new ways to express itself. If you've lost someone you love, person or pet, and the absence feels like a physical thing pressing against your chest, making it hard to breathe sometimes, I want you to know they aren't completely gone. Look for them in the small, unexplainable moments, the familiar scent that drifts through the room when no one is there, the feeling of being watched over when you're alone. The dream so vivid you wake up certain they were really there. And if a new love comes into your life, a stray cat on a rainy day perhaps, or a person with kind eyes who makes you laugh for the first time in months, don't feel guilty about opening your heart again. Love isn't finite. It doesn't run out. Making room for someone new doesn't diminish what came before. The people who truly love you want you to be happy, even when they can no longer be the source of that happiness. Trust me on this. I've seen it from both sides now. Keep their memory close, but keep your heart open. That's how love wins in the end, not by holding tight to what's gone, but by allowing it to transform into something that helps you keep living, keep loving, keep finding beauty in each day you're given. And who knows, maybe someday when your time here is finished, you'll feel a familiar presence waiting to welcome you home. Because that's what I believe now. That home isn't a place at all. It's wherever the souls who love each other can finally be together again. With eternal love, Dusty.